After the death of Julian the Apostate, his army was still stranded in Persia. The army scrambled to appoint a successor, deciding on Jovian, a high-ranking military official who had served as the imperial guard commander for the now-dead Constantius II. With his army running out of supplies and stuck on the wrong side of the Tigris River, Jovian was forced to make a humiliating peace with the Persians in order to save the lives of his tens of thousands of soldiers. In exchange for an unopposed escape to Roman territory, the Romans would surrender 5 provinces and several key strategic fortresses, leave Armenia, as well as a 30-year peace and an annual tribute payment. This was absolutely shameful, but Jovian and the Romans had no choice. He withdrew to Roman territory, having sacrificed Roman pride to save Roman men. Jovian only reigned for 8 months before dying on his way back to Constantinople in early 364. The one important thing he did do was again promote Christianity as the state religion, this time for good. There would be no further pagan revivals. Christianity was now the sole religion of the Roman world. When Jovian died, the army reassembled in Nicaea to choose a new emperor. After some deliberation, they settled on Valentinian, another qualified and high-ranking military official. Apparently, Valentinian's reputation within the military itself was not the best, and the soldiers were somewhat uneasy about him taking power. He quieted their discontent by appointing his brother Valens as co-emperor. Interestingly, even though he was clearly the senior emperor, Valentinian chose to rule from the west rather than from the east. This division was finalized in mid-364, with Valens setting up his court in Constantinople and Valentinian setting up his court in Milan. This choice was probably because of the recent peace with Persia. Valentinian, as the more experienced military leader, saw that threats were coming fast for the Western Empire, and he wanted to be there to stop them. This is why he took Illyricum as well. The Danube frontier would prove to be a hotspot of foreign invasion. From this point, the two emperors lived separate lives and ruled separate worlds. Next week, I'll talk about Valens, but this week is Valentinian's story. First, a character assessment of Valentinian, a man whom some have referred to as Valentinian the Great. Valentinian was a great general, experienced in military affairs and very well suited to the militarized Roman world of the late 4th century. He ran his administration in military style, expecting strict discipline, enforcing rigid hierarchy, and taking absolutely no bullshit. He was also very prone to outbursts of anger. He was reportedly very cruel and unforgiving, and although he tried to restrain himself, his temper often came down on subordinates who had made mistakes. He had several of his high officials executed for issues of relatively minor misconduct. Our best source, Ammianus Marcellinus, describes him as having bloodthirsty tendencies, but being otherwise a prince of good and honorable character. Take of that what you will. As Valentinian made his way to the west, he received 2 reports of trouble within the empire. One report came from the east, where his brother Valens was facing a revolt from a usurper. The second report was from the west, where the Alemanni, once humbled by Julian, were again invading Roman territory. Valentinian, after a lot of thinking, decided to keep marching west, trusting his brother to take care of his own affairs. While Valentinian was on his way to Gaul, the local commanders attempted to deal with the Alemanni threat with mixed results. First, a couple generals had their armies destroyed by the marauding Germans, but then the cavalry commander in Gaul managed to rout the Alemanni army, taking many prisoners. As soon as Valentinian arrived, he was struck by an illness and almost died. Recognizing his own mortality, he quickly appointed his son Gratian, who was only 8 years old, to the rank of Augustus. Valentinian wanted no concerns about the succession if and when he died. Meanwhile, in Britain, which was usually just ignored or forgotten by emperors, several forces of raiders from the Picts and other Highland tribes were soundly defeated by a general named Theodosius. His son, also named Theodosius, will be very important for Roman history. In the spring of 368, Valentinian crossed the Rhine to challenge the Alemanni on their own turf. After some bloody battles, he managed to crush their armies and put them to flight, forcing their leaders to make peace. The next year, he returned to the Rhine, ordering the fortification of the frontier to protect against future raids and invasions from the troublesome Germans. He also ordered a large fort built on a large hill beyond the Rhine, but this fort was destroyed by Alemanni raiders before it could be completed. At this point, the prevailing trends should be obvious. The Germans were growing more and more powerful every year. The Alemanni were now too powerful to put down forever. Valentinian could stop them, but he could not assert any real authority over them. Under Valentinian, imperial authority was strong, but how would the Alemanni treat a weak imperial authority? In 370, Valentinian attempted to negotiate an alliance with the Burgundians, another frontier tribal association, in order to defeat an aggressive Alemanni king named Macrian. However, Valentinian, in his high-handed fashion, refused to meet with the Burgundian representatives and lost the chance at an alliance. Because of this, he was forced to spend the next few years chasing Macrian around Germany. Although he never succeeded in capturing the rogue German, at least he distracted the Alemanni from attacking Roman territory. During those same few years, Valentinian also cooperated with friendly segments of the Alemanni, taking many of them into the Roman army as auxiliary soldiers. This had been happening for a while, but Valentinian played an active role in recruiting thousands of foreigners to boost the Roman army's manpower. Historians used to call this the barbarization of the Roman army. At this point, the Alemanni units were still placed under the command of Roman officers, but necessity would later force this to change. In 374, Valentinian was finally drawn away from his affairs on the Rhine River in order to address an invasion from the Quadi over the Danube. This war, which had been provoked by the construction of Roman fortifications in Quadi territory, as well as the murder of a Quadi king, saw much of the Roman countryside devastated by raids. Valentinian arrived on the Danube in 375, where he was immediately met by a group of Quadi ambassadors who apologized profusely to the emperor and attempted to plead for their people. He sent them off with kind words and then ignored everything they told him, marching across the Danube and devastating their land anyway. In November of that year, Valentinian was again met by a group of ambassadors from the Quadi, who pleaded the case for their people once again. This time, Valentinian was in no mood to listen. In fact, he was so angry that he rose from his sitting position to shout and curse at the ambassadors. He was so mad, apparently, that he literally had a stroke, and then he just died. Probably the funniest death of any Roman emperor, honestly. Valentinian was a good emperor. Would I call him great? Maybe not. But it is undeniable that he was effective in preserving stability in the Roman West. He won great victories over the Germans, some of the last great victories over the frontier peoples that Rome would ever see. He was proactive, fortifying the frontiers and even allying with friendly German tribes to protect Roman interests. All things considered, though, Valentinian's years of campaigning had left the Rhine peaceful, but hardly pacified. The Alemanni, while they were content to sit around for now, would certainly not forever. The Romans hardly knew, but there were many more threats to come. Threats so great that no man, no matter how great, could stop them.